Hello. Welcome to Open Source episode 16. I'm delighted to have Rory Unsworth. Give us a kiss.
Hi, everyone.
And Mark Simpson. Give us a wave.
Hey, everybody.
Hi. So let's kick it right off. Mark, tell us about your background and what is it in the news that you found interesting this week?
Yeah, sure. So back in the regular office, hence the background now. And I thought I'd take a trip out to a coffee shop. Even though I'm a big tea drinker, not a coffee drinker, the thing I like this week is that Starbucks is offering customers an app that they can trace the full provenance of their coffee. It's blockchain powered underneath. It's a partnership they've got with Microsoft, and it's the Microsoft Azure blockchain service underneath it. And it's really as simple as consumers can just scan the QR code on the bag of the coffee using their smartphone. And then they get the information where the bean's used, where it was grown, how it's been processed, how it's been exported. Even, if you're a real coffee nut, the location when it was roasted. And if you want to look at the carbon footprint, you can see the ports that they were shipped to and beyond. And you can actually even get what they call a virtual expedition of the coffee bean from the farmers, the roasters, the baristas. You can see the whole thing. And I know it's not particularly new, and coffee's been something that, people like IBM Food Trust has been providing solutions on. But the fact that it's getting more and more mainstream, I think is fantastic. So I really like that one.
Great. And as you mentioned, it's related to the IBM Food Trust. We're going to be releasing a podcast with Dave Behrens, who is the CEO of Farmer Connect, who's going to talk about their app. So it'll be interesting to see the differences between those two. Thanks for that. Rory, tell us, what is in the news you found interesting this week?
Well, I've got a bit of a theme this week. I'm thinking about the value of mid-tech solutions. Not really mid-tech, but not the DLT, not the quantum. I'm wondering about the positioning of those extremely high-tech pieces in the value chain, and I'm thinking about the extremely strong business cases we've got with technologies that we've been talking about for a while: the AI, natural language processing, big data, stuff that we comfortably talk about, we really understand, So in that context, my like of the week is a startup I came across called Safeside. And you know how it's been in lockdown, all those encounters with strangers on Zoom, But this really was one of the best ones. And the CEO was a super nice guy, and he told me such a good entrepreneur story that I really want to share it. And for me, there's a lesson in it too. So a couple of years ago, he was living between London and Zurich, and he wanted to buy some life insurance. And he preferred buying it in Switzerland for some reason, and was told that he would have to have a meeting with an agent. And he tried to find a way out of this, to do it digitally, but he just couldn't. And in the UK, of course, at the time, you could apply online. You just give it a few details, and then you're immediately into deciding what kind of payout you want. And then you've got your first bill for premium, right? Mm-hmm. But not in Switzerland. So cut a long story short, he found out that Switzerland absolutely needed a life insurer, which allows you to get coverage online. He set about building one, and then he realized that he could polish this diamond even further by changing the life product slightly and extending it and allowing all those things you need for your bereaved loved ones besides just money. So for instance, handing over electronic files, right? Emails, or erasing them if you've got something to hide on death. Photographs, all that kind of digital legacy, as well as obviously the financial side. So for me, the lesson is you don't always have to use the latest technology to make a huge difference. Our industry is so underdeveloped from a digital perspective that, and in lots of different areas, it's so diverse in so many different countries, just doing something like this, allowing the Swiss to buy life insurance online, can make a super successful business. So I'll try and get Safeside on an open source shortly, so we can ask them about their experience here and about whether they agree with me and my theory about mid tech. And in the meantime, I'll put a link on the thread to Safeside.
Excellent. And I love the customer centricity. I've got a problem, I'm going to resolve it and do it myself. Absolutely. Thanks for that, Rory. Mark,
I was just going to say, I love that as well. And the people that don't just complain about it, they go and make a difference. I love that.
Exactly. What is it in the news you found that made you wonder?
So this week, just to change tack, if I can go to the right way, it's always opposite. So in the blockchain software provider space, we usually see the main suspects slugging it out. So we see Ethereum, Hyperledger, Corda. Well, there's potentially a new kid on the block that had me wondering this week. Literally, I think it's just announced in the last day or so. So it's around Concordium is the name, and again, I'll put the link in the bottom. And it's an interesting piece that we often see the argument between permissionless, decentralized blockchains, and we see the private permissioned blockchains, and usually the challenge between the broadcast of the public blockchain versus the private blockchains that are restricted and regulated, and people are typically in one camp or the other. And I know, Walid, you've had some interesting conversations with both sides of that divide. Well, what's interesting with Concordium is they believe there's actually a third way, a hybrid way, an and way, which I always love an and, as you know. But they try to keep the sensitive data private, so they use a mixture of identity and zero knowledge proofs. And then they also have a flexible option to deploy on an open blockchain. And again, the CEO there, Lone Fons Schroeder, and I'm apologizing because I'm sure I pronounced it incorrectly, but says, yeah, you sometimes need permission-based, but really if you want new business models, then you need to bake in permissionless, which again, I like. What I've also noticed is they've got a really impressive team behind them and an equally impressive advisory board. So they've got the former Danish Prime Minister, who was also the General Secretary of NATO, the former Vice Chair of NASDAQ, the former Skype COO, they've got MasterCard, a series of others. And I just encourage people to read the position paper and see what they think about it.
Fascinating. And just to build on this whole hybrid, as some of you may be aware, Consensus recently acquired Quorum from JP Morgan. Both Consensus and Quorum, of course, are Ethereum based. Consensus is much more in the public kind of space, whilst Quorum is much more in the private kind of space. So it's going to be interesting if we're going to be seeing more hybrid models come out through this acquisition. But also on this question about hybrid, was preparing a podcast. I'm going to be recording with Dale Christie, who is the head of blockchain at FedEx from a blockchain strategy. He's a fan, of the potential of public blockchains, but doesn't believe we're quite there yet, and that there's still room for those private blockchains, but not for the long run. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Rory, what is it in the news that made you wonder?
So again, coming on my theme of sort of mid-tech, my wonder came during a networking dinner I was invited to here in Zurich. A headhunter and a software consultancy were trying to understand the Zurich fintech scene, and I was lucky enough to be invited along. There were some really, really good people there, and including the chief data officer of a large bank here in Zurich. And we were asked to give our opinions over dinner on two topics. One was DLT, and the other one was DLT and crypto, right? The two together. But the second was on quantum computing. And in the beginning, they were such high-powered people, they were just throwing opinions at each other. But we started to reach a sort of consensus, which was that quantum was pretty irrelevant to insurance for the time being. That was the overall view. And regarding DLT, the big banks and the insurers who were there seemed to have the view that it wasn't going to revolutionize traditional business models. Despite its promise, they felt that DLT could revolutionize the finance. And if you look at the old Tapscott books and stuff, well, that's what it's all about, isn't it? About how you turn everything on its head. But it could, if one company really needs to share data with a company that's not directly its client. But these guys pointed out that's not how finance works. People jealously guard their own data around their own clients and interactions. So yeah, that was interesting. Anyway, regarding, we then went to talk about what are the real problems and what are the real technologies that can help. And people talked still about efficiency challenges and data management challenges. And they felt that many other technologies were capable of plugging those gaps, not quantum, not DLT. And they described a number of legitimate attempts to use DLT to plug certain gaps in processes, but each time the business case just didn't work. There was an easier way of doing it with other technology. So, or buying it in from someone who's already doing it. So for them, the really important technologies remain NLP, machine learning, AI, big data. So interesting, huh? And my wonder is that right?
So I would love to have attended one of those networking dinners maybe 20 years ago when the internet was being talked about, if they had a similar kind of review to it. Because the thing is that, you know, we have imagination, we can try and make predictions on things, but it is, I know we keep hearing it again and again, it is still, you know, a nascent technology, and we're clueless on where it's going to take us, but we're seeing increasing amount of signs of where that could be. And we, you know, the three of us, we're privileged, you know, that with Insureblocks, we get to interact with heads of innovation, heads of businesses across the world, across different industries. And they're all sharing, you know, different insights. And when you start putting all those insights together, you start seeing real potential. Right now, a lot of the blockchain projects are around, you know, efficiency improvement, you know, cost cutting. There's very little understanding that there is this opportunity for new business models, because that, to get to that level, means different types of interactions with our existing partners and customers, but also new interactions with people we had never thought of, right? And that is the real promise of blockchain, is as much a technological revolution as it is a sociological revolution. And we're just at the beginning of that. So yeah, I of course think it will be revolutionary, but because I have the privilege, and we have the privilege of being able to talk to people from across industries and across the world. And when you put all these insights together, you get quite an interesting picture.
No, Wally, I love it when you get passionate like this, and you're going to change the world. But don't get me wrong. They all believe that in 10 years, it is the plumbing, as Mark likes to call it, of the industry. It's not that. They just thought that it's, you know, its potential to revolutionize may not come good. They feel that the incumbents are very, very quick learners and smart followers. So if ever anything comes up with anything, they're going to jump on it. So, you know, they feel that that potential for revolution is there, but that it's probably not going to come about. But let's see. That's my wonder, right?
I completely agree. And just very rapidly to add, you know, that's where I think there's also cultural differences between the West and the East, right? Where in Asia, they have a tendency of thinking much further down the line, you know, and planning for that. Whilst here in the West, you know, we're thinking about quick shareholder returns. You know, it's like, we got to focus on the next quarter. We're not thinking about the next 10 years, right? If you look at, you know, forget China. China is huge, and we always hear lots of news, but even smaller countries like Thailand, they keep throwing out new blockchain initiatives from across different sectors. Not quite the same in other Western countries, I would say. Sorry, Mark.
I would agree with you, Walid. It's not uncommon in Eastern business to have a business plan that goes out 60 years. I remember working on one that a business plan was over 100 years. That was the view of the future. Versus, yeah, I mean, you look at a CEO's tenure at a Fortune 500, it's between 3 quarters. If you get bad results, you get fired, and 20 if you do 5 years, you've done well. And it's a challenge. And what I find really interesting is we still see these as or choices, rather than how do we combine that. And I'm always interested in how people do arrive at the decisions they do. I'm optimistic that COVID has destroyed a number of axioms and beliefs that we had that ideally will make us more open. But equally, I see economic pressure coming and people reverting to strategies and types and behaviors that have allowed them to survive and even thrive in the past. So I think we'll see that great tension. And where does it all come back to? If you can't articulate the real value and you can't demonstrate it, then you almost don't deserve to get off the blocks. And taking it from a technology position on its own is not going to be enough. So you've got to be a real expert and getting the problem, identifying the solutions, and being able to articulate and then deliver that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, I want to thank you both very much for all sharing your great, you know, news and wonders in this episode. For you, we appreciate that quite a few of you have probably been on a holiday, but as much as I love my co-founders, would love to have some new faces come and join us in this open source. We love, to get, different insights, different viewpoints, to come and enrich this conversation. So please don't hesitate. Add a comment, ping one of us, and we'd love to have you join us in our next episodes. For now, take care, and we'll be seeing you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.